guys, I made a lesson on how to use triads to play jazz chords, and I decided I was going to try and do the same using open triads. I didn't really concern myself with open triads in the first lesson, even though the approach is pretty much the same, but finding the fingerings and using them is a little bit more tricky than the triads, so I thought I would save them for another lesson. I use open triads quite a lot myself, both as chords, but also as arpeggios. So it's definitely something to check out. I really like the sound of them because spreading out the notes works really well on a guitar like this. I think you might know the sound of open triads from Eric Johnson's intro to Cliffs of Dover, or horrible Steve Morse picking etudes, or I think pretty much the whole Californication album by Red Hot Chili Peppers is filled with it. Californication itself, at least, has a lot of them. And of course there's a Pat Metheny video where he uses it as a warm-up. Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff you can do with it. Okay, so the first thing we should talk about is how to construct an open triad, and what an open triad is, if you don't know it. An open triad is a triad, in this case anyway, is a triad where you take, if I play this C major triad in the second inversion, and I take the second note of the triad and move it down an octave, I'll get this. And that's an open C triad. So if I take, just as an example, I take these inversions and I'm gonna make open triads, so second note, octave down. Next one, second note, octave down. And then we get this one. And here there are a few things that we can look at, because here we get into trouble with the fingering. If I take this down an octave the way I did the other ones, I would get this fingering, which is it's possible. Or we could take another string, or we can do this one. And then, of course, this one is just going to be this one again. So you get that a lot with the open triads, that you sort of have to think a little bit about what fingering works. You might need to know several fingerings for the same inversion, so that you have it on different string sets, because when you use them, then probably one is going to fit better in the situation than the other. I also just thought about the fact that they lend themselves really well to using pick and fingers, or just playing with the fingers, because of the large intervals and string skipping. But they make, as Steve Morse has pointed out in several places, very good picking exercises. Okay, so let's look at some inversions of the basic triads, so the major, the minor, and the diminished triad. So C major, all strings. And D minor. So B diminished. notice that on some inversions I chose to spread them out over 5 strings, like this one, and sometimes I just keep them as close together as I can. As I said, you might want to check out both because you'll probably need them. It's a little bit depending on what you're playing. Okay, so the next thing we should do is to look at some 2-5-1 cadences, just to get an idea about how to use them. I'm just going to play some straightforward 2-5-1s in C, using the same approach as I did in the Triads lesson. So they're going to be D minor 7, G7 and C major 7, using an F major triad on the D minor, B diminished on the G7, and an E minor on the C major 7. Something like that. If we want to make it altered, an altered dominant, so a G7 altered, I'm going to use the same approach again. So we're going to use the diminished triad of the 7th of the scale. So I'm going to be using an F diminished on the G7. That should sound something like this. And you might notice that the voice leading kind of makes it want to resolve another way than on the first one, which is interesting, because it wants to go down instead of going up. Okay, so let's look at what more we can do, because of course we can also just start changing notes in the triads. So let's do that a few times. That's probably mostly something we need to work on the dominants, because those are the ones that we change around a lot. So here's a G7 flat 5. The chord that we want to change the most is probably the dominant. So here are a few examples of alterations on the G7. The first one is a G7 flat 5. In some of those voicings you can also see that when we change the B diminished to be to use it for a G7 flat 5, we actually end up with a D flat 7 shell voicing. It's more evident on these strings, I guess. Okay, and then, well, let's try G7 sharp 5. And since we already have the F diminished to play when we are playing over a G7 flat 9, we could try to use that to construct a G7 sharp 9 by exchanging the flat 9, so the A flat, with a sharp 9, which would be a B flat or A sharp. And that would be something like this. So now let's try taking the F major triad that we're using for the D minor voicing, and then instead of playing the 5th, so the A, we're going to play an 11th, which is a G. You'll notice that I actually played different voicings up here on the high octave, simply because here you can use the open string, and sometimes it's fun to actually try and incorporate that in the voicings, but up here I thought this was not so nice. For the C major 7 we can substitute the 5th, so the G, with an F sharp to get a sharp 11 sound. That should be something like this. And of course we can also substitute the 7th with a 6. So if we take the G minor voicing, we're going to put an A instead of the B, so we get this. So all these voicings are voicings that you can try to put into the chord progressions that you need to play. They can be a little bit difficult because they have a big range. They can be a little bit difficult to place because if you get too low with something that's supposed to be a flat 9 or something like that, then that's not going to work anymore. So you have to use your ears a bit to judge on that. But it's definitely something that's worth messing with. And actually, it works really well just for the normal voicing too. So if you're playing more simple songs with just triads, it's also just a nice way to vary how you play that. I think probably that's also why John Frusciante is using it so much on the Californication album. But you would have to ask him, I don't know. So that was my lesson on how to use open triads to voice jazz chords. It's a subject that I never really checked out systematically myself, so I did find a few new things in this. And I hope that you can use the stuff that I talked about in the lesson. If you like the lesson, then feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you have any comments, then leave them here on the video, or connect with me on Facebook or Twitter or Google+. Also, if you have any suggestions for topics that I might try to do a lesson on. So thank you for watching.